All right, our next speaker is Lisa Seppi. Oh, there she is. Lisa is an associate professor of art history at the State University of New York in Oswego, where she teaches modern and contemporary European American art history, critical theory, and Native American art.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I do want to quickly thank David and Kathleen, as well as staff members at the NMAI in both New York and DC, particularly Alexandra and Elizabeth, who worked so hard with all of us here today. And also Kay, of course. Thank you for graciously sharing your work. Thanks. For sharing your work and your life with myself, as well as many members here. My interest in Kay's work began in the late 1990s in graduate school when I first visited her at her home and studio in Ithaca, New York, where she was professor of art at Cornell University. At that point in her career, her work was undergoing significant changes in terms of medium, style, and subject matter. Although still using a version of her signature diptych format, the abstract iconography that dominated her work during the previous decade had been replaced with figures. The landscape began to spread across the entire painted surface, resisting its previous containment in a square single panel. And as a result of changes in medium, which entailed a switch from acrylic, saponified wax, and oil to oil and gouache, the visual quality of her painting style changed as well. As we sat across from one another at her kitchen table, after a full day of looking at and discussing her work, I asked Kay what accounted for all these changes. To which she replied emphatically, Rome. It's Rome's fault. Between 1996 and roughly 2003, WalkingStick divided her time between Ithaca, New York, and Italy, influenced by the abundance of figurative imagery there, depicted in Greek and Roman pottery and Renaissance painting. WalkingStick produced a large body of work executed in gouache on paper, in which she experimented with drawn and stenciled figures, isolating, fragmenting, and rearranging male and female bodies into emblematic forms. In this work, WalkingStick combines mountainous landscapes of Italy and occasionally North America with representations of human figures, many drawn from religious and mythological narratives, including the biblical figure Eve, Roman fauns, minotaurs, and the Native American figure Kokopelli. Through her choice of characters, a cast of erotic and mythic personae, WalkingStick engages the dualistic principles associated with human nature, particularly mind versus body and reason versus passion. The landscape imagery documents WalkingStick's travels through Italy, ranging from the mountains near Paestum in the Campania region, which provide an ethereal backdrop for 3 ancient Greek temples, to the meandering hills and lush valleys outside the city of Rome. Although WalkingStick's landscapes are handled in a naturalistic manner, most of her figures, rendered as simplified 2-dimensional forms, are produced using stencils. Curvilinear contours define human torsos and bulbous legs of fauns. The body of Eve is portrayed as a geometric hourglass motif inspired by Greek amphorae, and detached heads, torsos, and interlocking legs are configured to form bodies of a pair of lovers. In reality, WalkingStick arrived in Rome having already given serious thought as to how she might represent the human figure in a non-romantic, non-idealized manner. Although her decision to utilize stencils harks back to her early training as a printer, it was also due in part to artist Nancy Spiro's figurative work, like Dildo Dancer from the Black and the Red series, which she saw in exhibit in Rome. Since the 1970s, Spiro had painted, printed, cut, and collaged figures and text onto panels, known as her scroll paintings, drawn from a range of sources, including ancient mythology, art history, contemporary culture, and literature. Spiro's visually dynamic figures conveyed a sense of antiquity and frank sexuality. Back in 1997, WalkingStick stated, and I quote, "It was a powerful installation, by far the best contemporary work I saw in Rome," end quote. Similarly, WalkingStick began using stencils in order to produce iconic figures that contained both beautiful line but expressed raw visceral presence. The inherently flat, manipulated quality produced by stencils helped WalkingStick avoid conventionalized treatments of the female figure as an idealized object, while her choice of materials, oil stick and gouache, on gessoed paper, produced the painterly results she wanted. In drawings like the one shown here, Kokopelli Energy and Gods of Pestum, WalkingStick juxtaposes mountains with representations of Kokopelli, Roman fauns, and Eve, separating them between left and right halves of the page. The humpback flute player, also known as Kokopelli, is seen in numerous prehistoric pictographs and petroglyphs in Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah, for example. Although rock art portrayals vary, Kokopelli is easily identified with his curved or bent-over posture, denoting a humped back, a visually pronounced or erect phallus when present, and he is often but not always shown carrying or playing a flute. The well-known modern figure of Kokopelli is considered a slightly roguish fertility figure, fabled for his sexual prowess and his playful, prankish antics. WalkingStick's faun figure, there we go. WalkingStick's faun figure is based upon the small bronze statue from the House of Faun in Pompeii. He's another inviting figure that entices us to put away our intellectual constraints and enjoy ourselves. In Roman mythology, fauns are identified with the Roman god Faunus and equated with Greek satyrs, the male attendants of the wine god Dionysus, as depicted in this fresco at the Villa of the Mysteries in Pompeii. Like Kokopelli, whom WalkingStick describes as a tempter, fauns and satyrs seduce nymphs in their music. The uninhibited sexuality and mischievous personalities associated with these mythic male characters influenced the direction of WalkingStick's work as she became interested in engaging what she describes as mythic corporeality. Kokopelli and fauns are rustic deities personifying lust and carnal desire. They symbolize the classic dialectic struggle between disciplined reason and unrestrained desire. The struggle is also embodied in the figure of Eve, who features prominently in drawings like Eve Energy. This includes 6 silhouetted bodies of Eve rendered as headless, truncated figures alongside stenciled legs. Eve is another figure signifying what happens when reason and intellect do not restrain one's emotions and passion. Within Judeo-Christian traditions, Eve comes to embody the fallen condition of humankind and the debased materiality of the body and physical world, both of which must be controlled and transcended. WalkingStick doesn't share these dogmatic views of Eve or the need to suppress one's desire or passion. As she puts it, quote, Eve's error is highly overrated in our patriarchal society. She was just following her curious nature. Rather than condemning, instead, WalkingStick's work is a celebration of female sensuality. In some of the work, legs comprise parts of what appear as a stylized image of a copulating couple, or, on their own, the free-floating legs and other body parts are metaphors for disembodied experience, sexual or otherwise, that cause us to feel as if we come apart physically or temporarily transcend the physical boundaries of our bodies. As part of a larger whole, this work testifies to the impact of Italian culture and art on WalkingStick's life and work at the time. Her figures are clearly influenced by the preponderance of erotic imagery seen in the art of classic Greece and ancient Rome. In her travels throughout Italy, WalkingStick was affected by the sexually explicit frescoes at Pompeii and the suburban baths in the House of Mysteries, for example, and also at the Villa under Farnesina in Rome, as well as the red and black figure-painted pottery or the mass-produced Aretine ceramics, the latter two of which place love-making couples in Symposium or on banquet settings. So in addition to this classical art, the plethora of Renaissance and Baroque paintings with Christian themes struck similarly a chord with WalkingStick's own religious upbringing in a close-knit Protestant family where routine talk of God and spirituality took place. Therefore, whether looking at Duccio's mountains with their ethereal gold skies, denoting sacred space, or the very humanist and intimate portrayal of saints by Caravaggio, Italian art seemed to share some of her interest in merging sensual and spiritual content. Another influential aspect of contemporary Italian culture involves attitudes towards sexuality that stem from what art historian David Brown sees as, quote, the ancient Greek understanding of beautiful bodies as graced by the divine, end quote. He argues this is renewed in the Renaissance and the frequency also in which, quote, sexually explicit imagery was part of the public sphere and not the private in the ancient world, combined with the potentiality of sexuality as a religious metaphor in the Baroque art of Rome, which can be seen, of course, in Bernini's well-known works I'm showing you here, the Blessed Ludovica Albertoni and the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. As a result of the mixture of ancient mythology and Christian faith, it has produced a cultural climate in Italy that, according to WalkingStick, openly accepts and celebrates the human body and sexuality. As she said, quote, in Rome, there is a heightened sensuality, a body consciousness, a constant awareness of the duality of sexuality that the United States simply no longer has, probably never did, end quote. Living in this atmosphere was no doubt a liberating experience for WalkingStick, particularly as an artist whose work has consistently demonstrated a concern with exploring the sensuality of the body alongside spiritual or mystical meanings of transcendence, transport, or transformation. As Albert Einstein also said, quote, the most beautiful, the most profound emotion that we can experience is the sensation of the mystical, end quote. During an artist in residence at the American Academy in Rome in 1997, WalkingStick made numerous sketches of the Italian Alps. Commonly referred to as the Dolomites, this mountain range extending across northeast Italy contains some of the country's most dramatic landscapes with spectacular limestone spires and lush green alpine meadows. WalkingStick used these sketches to produce a set of charcoal drawings and several diptych paintings. WalkingStick's autobiographical approach toward landscape, particularly her identification with the mountains of Italy, is a distinguishing feature of this work, which contains large-scale female nudes, some of which are based upon her own form, superimposed above or physically embedded within expansive alpine settings. Despite their imposing scale, the figures are intimate and human. The naturalistically detailed, often graphically explicit figures convey a broad range of psychological conditions as they express raw, visceral experience, sometimes drawn from her own, and also her newfound love of Italy. In Alpine Maenad, a large female figure crouched down on all fours faces what appears to be a treacherous and foreboding mountain landscape where white jagged ridges rise up alongside her like flames. Although the position and dark tonality of the figure's body prevents a clear reading of her demeanor, her head appears to be cupped in her hands, suggesting a state of confusion or maybe agitation. Maenads, which again feature prominently in the Villa of the Mystery frescoes in Pompeii, Maenads, which are also known as, in Roman lore as Bacchants, were the priestesses of the Greek god of wine Dionysus, or the Roman god Bacchus. According to mythology, during orgiastic rituals, Maenads became possessed by the spirit of Dionysus, wherein they tore apart and consumed the bodies of animals and their sacrificial male victims. In less salacious accounts, the Dionysian cult's rituals used trance-inducing practices like consuming wine and dancing to reach a state of liberation or freedom from social constraints and self-imposed inhibitions. Clearly, WalkingStick's Maenad does not appear to be in an ecstatic state of frenzy. Nonetheless, she is meant to suggest the unrestrained, sensual character associated with Maenads and the Dionysiac principle embodied therein. In this later work from 2003, WalkingStick returns to this theme. Here, 4 female figures identified as Bacchants dance in a state of euphoria and joyous abandon that is in keeping with the wine god's role as liberator. Their charmingly awkward bodies, engaged in dance and physical movement, convey the sensuous energy and feeling of connection with others that result in those willing to give themselves over to natural instinct. WalkingStick's Bacchants, shown twirling against a decorative backdrop of flowers and acanthus leaves inspired by first-century Roman marble carvings, convey a willingness to accept the risk of being found naked or exposed, for the chance to experience a state of rapture, when the body and the mind or spirit, no longer aware of their separateness, become one. Much like these female figures in the 2001 painting, Joyoso, 1 and 2 variations, WalkingStick juxtaposes a mountain landscape with the image of two figures that dance together energetically. The figures appear dreamlike because they are in fact based upon physical memories of how it feels to dance. As WalkingStick explained, quote, "One of the constants in my artwork is the emphasis on touch, which is sometimes expressed through the materials itself, and other times through the image that suggests the physical feel of a body or a place. The memory of touch, that kinesthetic memory of how it feels, is a part of our mind's imaging of physical activity. Touch is suppressed in our Western culture to our great loss, for it's a basic human need." Through figures, forms, and landscape, her work invokes the sensory experience associated with how place or an activity feels and the psychological states therein, especially in this cast of dancing figures, which are no doubt influenced by the preponderance of dancing figures in classical art. Through WalkingStick's combination of illusionistic landscapes, gold skies, and figures, she collapses the distinction between the spiritual or memory and matter or earthly. Figures communicate physical euphoria or jubilation, while the mountains and gold skies, which anchor the figures between earthly and metaphysical realms, symbolize the divine or mystical. During this period, WalkingStick wrote, quote, "The primary subject of my work has always been concerned with my relationship to the divine, but these newer works, influenced and enriched by my Italian experience, seem to add ecstasy, both spiritual and physical, to that content," end quote. Simply defined, ecstasy is an overwhelming feeling of joy or rapture. Rapture is further defined as ecstatic delight or mental transport. Yet the Greek word ekstasis, which means standing forth naked, describes the state of mind that ensues from a religious trance or some other related, when consciousness is stripped away, leaving only the essential self. WalkingStick's figures convey the outward expression of ecstasy in terms of both a heightened psychological and bodily state of awareness, often experienced through physical actions and expressed through the memories of those experiences, like dancing. In the large diptych paintings titled Il Regalo and Il Sogno, which means the gift and the dream, respectively, the contoured bodies of the female figures are represented in simple, almost meditative stances. They hover alongside roaming aerial views of the Passo Croce Domini, which translates roughly Cross of God, in the Italian Alps. On top of both figures' heads, one clearly sees the cranial extension or top knot found depicted in statues of Buddha, known as the Unishna. This cranial bump or crown of hair is the mark of a cosmic individual who has experienced spiritual enlightenment. The posture and demeanor of these figures conveys a mood of contemplation and a sense of rebirth or revelation that is in keeping with the luminous gold sky and the expansive mountain scenes around them. Both figures lack physical materiality and consequently read as traces of bodies now absent, residual memories, or visions of transcendent beings made temporarily incarnate. The mysterious, intangible nature of the figure's physical existence stands in stark contrast to the heightened illusionism of WalkingStick's landscape we see around and through them. Nonetheless, both of these commanding figures convey the sense that an important transaction or communion has occurred, placing them in touch with higher truths. In these works, the figures bear testimony to the human condition through both historical and especially personal memories of love, desire, joy, ecstasy, frustration, and even anger. The Italian works demarcate a pivotal time in both WalkingStick's personal life and career. She had finally finished grieving over the death of her first husband, her children were grown up and leading their own lives, and although her career was doing great, she was ready for change, to begin the proverbial next chapter in one's life. And for those of us who have had the pleasure of Kay being part of our lives, as we know, this is a woman with an infectious and ardent passion for living. to which her art is just one small testimony. And so, what is the gift referenced in Il Regalo's title? The gift was Italy, of course. Thank you.